Welcome to Eat Well, Travel Better, the Business of Food Travel podcast with Eric Wolf and Ashi Vale, where we help you become a better industry professional by gaining inspiration from some of the world's most successful people in the food and beverage tourism industry. With each episode, we meet these leaders and examine their secrets of success. We reveal the obstacles and challenges they have faced, along with their solutions and triumphs, and give you ideas and inspirations for many of the same business issues that you may be facing as well. And now for today's episode. I'm Eric Wolf, and I'll be your host today for episode 13 of Eat Well, Travel Better, the Business of Food Travel podcast. Normally, I would be joined by my co-host, Ashi Vale, but she is on maternity leave for a few months. Today, we'll be speaking with Amber and Eric Hoffman, a married couple who are also bloggers who now live in Girona, Spain, in the province of Catalonia. After extensive careers in law and advertising, Amber and Eric said goodbye to corporate life to travel the world in search of the best culinary destinations and experiences. 70-plus countries and 6 years later, they are still going strong, providing tips and recommendations on where to eat and what to eat around the world. They have authored The Food Traveler's Guide to Emilia-Romagna, the only English-language comprehensive food and wine travel guidebook to that region of Italy. Their second book, The Food Traveler's Guide to the Costa Brava, Spain, will be out shortly. Welcome, Amber and Eric.
Hey, Eric. How are you?
Good.
I don't know how I feel about being lucky number 13.
Guys, how does an American married couple end up in Girona, Spain?
Well, long story short, we left the U.S. to travel the world in 2012. Started with Central America and Eastern Europe and ended up in Southeast Asia and lived in Bali and Bangkok for about 18 months each, and just had always dreamed of living in Europe and living that lifestyle. And while in Southeast Asia, we missed cheese and wine and thought Girona would be a perfect destination for two people who love food and wine.
Yeah, I think Amber took a lot of words. I would have just said food, wine.
Well, why Girona? Why not Italy? Why not France? Why not Portugal?
The short answer is we actually were deciding between Bologna and Girona. We've worked a lot in both areas. We've written a lot about the culinary scene in both areas, and we love both cities. But while traveling here last year to do research for my book, and we were sitting in a square in Girona having a gin tonic at the end of an afternoon, it just sort of felt right. It just felt like the right place for us to be.
And do you have any regrets now that you've been there for a while?
Not at all. I can't think of a regret. I do miss Asian food.
I was going to say, I wish there was a Thai restaurant here, but...
any budding entrepreneurs out there who have a Thai or Vietnamese background that want to come and open a restaurant, you will have two loyal customers.
Or dim sum or dumplings. But all of that is a 38-minute train ride up the road in Barcelona anyway. So if we really, really feel the need, it's right there. It's just not, in Girona. So other than that, we love the people here and going to the market on an almost daily basis and getting to know butchers and fishmongers and winemakers. And it's just really is amazing how we've been welcomed into the food and wine community.
And when I was doing some research on you before the show today, I was reading, you wrote your book on Emilia-Romagna when you were not there, that you did not visit it. Is that correct?
Well, we had visited multiple times. We had done, I can't even remember, 6 or 7 trips over about a 2-year period, mostly to research the book. But I physically wrote it from a Costa Coffee in Bangkok, the closest cafe to our apartment in Bangkok. And it was fairly painful, as much as there are, places for pasta and pizza, and you can kind of get everything in Bangkok. It was a little painful to be writing about Italian wine and, Lambrusco and Parmigiano Reggiano and Prosciutto di Parma and not have those things at my fingertips.
Right.
Needless to say, the book about Costa Brava is going a lot more smoothly, that we have access to all the great food products right here at our fingertips.
I know that is one of the things I hear about from tourism offices around the world is they are frustrated by journalists who write stories about their areas but have never even visited.
Yeah, I know. It's frustrating. And even just recently, I wanted to update one of our big blog posts about traveling in India. And we did one trip a few years ago, and I really wanted to update it. And I actually did a collaboration post where I invited a bunch of other bloggers who are experts on India to go and kind of supplement our knowledge, because I couldn't write as much as I wanted to, having only visited for a few weeks. And so I wanted to rely on other experts. And, I do sometimes feel like when I'm reading a read posts about Bali, having lived in Bali for 18 months, and I look at it and I was like, how can any blogger recommend this or that? It makes it seem as though they haven't been there.
Yeah, sometimes you can also read between the lines and you'll hear in their writing that it doesn't really sound like they've been there. It almost sounds like they're copying out of Wikipedia sometimes.
Yeah, and there is a lot of incentive to do that, because we try to write from our experiences, and I'm really particular. I try to be as particular as possible about the accuracy, particularly on food products, like in Emilia-Romagna. Like, I don't want to write something incorrect about prosciutto or Parmesan Reggiano. I want to be a resource for that. But there are a lot of incentives for bloggers to just write for SEO or search engine optimization, or
Right.
to share a pretty image to Instagram without really understanding the culture or the food or the effect that their photo or their tourism has on the destination.
Well, tell us a little bit about your guide to Emilia-Romagna. What's it structured like? What are the kinds of things you cover in it?
The book is broken down into 3 parts, and it's going to be fairly similar for our Costa Brava book as well. The first part of the Emilia-Romagna book, there's a chapter for pasta, one for gelato, one for cheese, one for meat. And so, for example, in the meat chapter, we talk about prosciutto di Parma, culatello, mortadella, all of the very famous Italian meat products that actually come from Emilia-Romagna, as well as go into all the various kinds of what I call meat breads, the different types of breads that you eat with mortadella or prosciutto. The second part is all about the wine of the region and how to find great wineries to visit. And then the third part is more of the practical tips. It's what towns to visit, how to get around, how to get to Emilia-Romagna, hotels, festivals. So the third part is probably a more typical travel guide to what people are used to reading. But the first 2 are really trying to educate people about what to eat and the key food products of the area.
Well, you said pasta, gelato, wine. I mean, those are the basic food groups, right?
Of course.
Pretty much.
Of
But
course.
even, I think a lot of people, particularly Americans, us included, we grew up in New Jersey, where a lot of the Italian food influence was from Sicily, Naples, southern Italy.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's a different kind of, pasta that we grew up with versus what's available in Emilia-Romagna. And there's so many different pasta varieties. They're made differently than others. They're made with egg. They're all fresh. There's differences between what pasta is available in Parma versus Modena versus Bologna. And so there's a lot of differences there.
And I think one of the biggest differences about Emilia-Romagna, again, if you're from the States, is the lack of tomato. Tomato is not a primary ingredient, unlike in Naples or Sicily. And that really caught us by surprise the first time we visited.
Even pizza is not as popular there as it is in Rome and farther south.
I did not know that.
Neither did we.
Pizza is one of those basic food groups as well, so I'd have to have pizza in my diet for sure.
Yeah, we managed to squeeze in some visits to some pizza places when there, don't get me wrong, but the pastas are more, they're cream sauce based or cheese sauce based. They're a little heavier, like more of the Italian products are from the north, because they have some influences from Germany and from Austria and Switzerland as well.
All right. Well, how do you decide your destinations? So you chose Emilia-Romagna, you've chosen Costa Brava. How do you pick those destinations?
Well, I think Emilia-Romagna is an interesting story. We were at the time living in Bali and had downloaded a whole bunch of episodes of No Reservations. And the late, great Anthony Bourdain inspired us to go to Emilia-Romagna for the first time. And again, being Americans who grew up in New Jersey, we were like, where is this place, Emilia-Romagna? How have we never heard of this place? And so we booked 2 tickets. We were going to Europe, and we said, we got to divert off to Italy and check out Emilia-Romagna. So, Anthony Bourdain, like many food travelers, had a big effect on where we decided.
I also, just talking about it from a blogging perspective as sort of a business, we also do tend to work with a lot of tourism boards and destinations. So as much as I don't want to travel to a destination solely because the tourism board wants to promote it, it does go a long way into how we've been able to explore some more unique areas and kind of give travelers an opportunity to explore outside of Paris, outside of London, outside of the big cities and the big destinations. Because there are a lot of these tourism boards for regions or smaller cities that really want to kind of spread the tourism wealth. And we've worked well with those tourism boards who've decided to kind of look outside the box on how to promote their destination.
Do you ever experience a conflict of interest where they've contacted you to write this article or book or whatever, and there starts to be a conflict of interest where they start to push content down a path and you want to go in a different path? How do you handle situations like that where you want to write about one thing and they want you to feature something else?
Well, with any tourism board or partner that we work with, sometimes they'll ask for a minimum level of content or a certain number of blog posts. And we always try to tell them up front that we can't guarantee any sort of minimal coverage because it all just depends on how the trip goes. Sometimes we have a bad trip. We've been to destinations that just didn't work. And we were very honest with the tourism board and said, listen, you guys aren't ready for us to write about you. Like maybe we can come back in a few years when your offerings better fit with what our readers expect. But we generally don't have any sort of conflicts. We've never had, in fact, Emilia-Romagna and Costa Brava, the two tourism boards work really well together to help promote the destinations together. So I think what we end up doing kind of complements one another rather than conflicting or having a conflict of interest. We worked with the Czech Republic a couple years ago, in part to promote their higher end dining and their wine, because the Czech Republic is obviously known for beer and Prague stag parties and stuff like that. And we did write about Czech wine and wine tourism. But at the same time, I also did write a blog post about Czech beer, because how could you not go to the Czech Republic?
And write about beer.
Right,
how could you go to the Czech Republic and not write about beer?
When I was reading about you, you had these corporate lives and you were kind of tired of it. And this happens a lot to people where they seem to be tired of their current jobs and they branch out into what their passion is. And then now you were saying that you're currently trying to figure out how to be an entrepreneur. So how's it going being an entrepreneur?
Good days and bad.
Sometimes we do miss those corporate jobs.
I miss the paychecks and the reliability of getting a paycheck every other week. And I think that's the biggest stress for someone who is trying to do something different. And so we have good weeks and bad. We have good months and bad. We have lean months where we don't know where our next project is coming from. And then, we'll have a good week where all of a sudden several companies want to partner with us. So you have to have the patience to be able to, and a little bit of savings also helps to give you that comfort.
Yeah, and I also think we're in a slightly different situation where we do have each other, and I think Amber and I complement each other very well in terms of she has her strengths and weaknesses. I have mine. I don't think there's actually too much overlap where our strengths are and where our weaknesses are. So, thinking back to friends in the States or in Europe that have been self-employed, I think now that we're in the thick of it, I have so much more respect for entrepreneurs than I did when I was selling advertising. And it's not easy. It really isn't easy. And to have success at it, I mean, you have to eat, sleep, and drink what you're working on all day long. And for us, we sometimes have a little bit of life ADD. So we're easily distracted sometimes, and we really kind of have to pull ourselves back in and say, okay, no, we need to get this project done. Everything else can wait. Let's move forward and then move on to the next shiny new toy.
And in the 6 years since we left, we've launched a couple businesses. Some of them have been very successful and then ran their course. Some of them have been not successful at all, like any entrepreneur will tell you. And so, right now what we're focused on is with the travel blog, as well as we do social media consulting and training for hotels and tourism brands. And so we sort of do wear two hats. Even to this day, we carry several business cards with us as well, which is always funny.
Well, what you were just saying there, I think that there's a couple lessons. First of all, you definitely need to have some kind of savings to cushion or not leave your job until you start having paying clients. We do a lot of training of entrepreneurs, and there's one person I'm speaking with right now, and she's ready to quit her day job. In fact, she said on the phone that she was going to quit her day job tomorrow, and I said, don't do that. Doing the website, you think it's going to be done in 2 months, it's going to take 6, right? Working out all the kinks, getting your product into the distribution channel. This is all going to take time. And then I think it finally dawned on her that maybe she should stay in her job for a little bit longer, do things in the night and the weekends to get it set up. And then when she truly has paying customers, then you can go ahead and launch it. So I think that's the first thing. And the second thing is, you're very right. Being an entrepreneur it's a job and you have to take it seriously. And I think sometimes people think it'll be fun. It'll be fun to write about these great food and wine destinations, or it would be fun to do food tours of our city. Well, yeah, it'll be fun, but it's also a lot of work. And I think a lot of times it doesn't dawn on them until things start to maybe get a little serious financially. And then they realize, oh gosh, I better take this serious, like a full-time job.
You're absolutely right. I mean, one of the businesses we had, almost 5 years ago, we sold products on Amazon, and it was fantastic. We were literally living the 4-hour work week, where, so long as we made sure the inventory was full, we just had to make sure there were no customer service issues. And Amazon it's its own beast, and people caught up to us, and eventually we shut down the business. And that was sort of a wake-up call. It was like, okay, we don't have this regular income coming in. I mean, the blog sort of took a back seat to the Amazon business, and then we had to scramble a little bit. And as Amber said before, we have good weeks, we have bad weeks. Not everyone wants to work with us. We hear a lot of no's. And it's just a matter of figuring out, okay, what do we do well? What do brands or tourism boards, want to do that we can help them do? So it is a struggle. It's not easy.
I think people, particularly Americans, see what we do and they think of it as being very glamorous because, we have photos of us sitting on the beach in the Maldives, or we sometimes find ourselves doing a wine tasting at 10 a.m. on a Monday morning. Where most of our friends in the U.S. are not so lucky on a Monday morning. But I think anytime you're an entrepreneur, there are the days that are definitely not glamorous. And we probably spend more time in our little apartment in Girona wearing pajama pants, binge watching TV in the background while I'm stressing out about search engine optimization and how to get a blog post seen more, by more people. I probably spend more time doing that than we do the fun and exciting thing than dining at Michelin star restaurants and taking food tours and all the fun and glamorous stuff.
I don't even think we've been to the beach this year.
No, I don't think so.
There you go. Life of a travel blogger. Not every day is a beach.
No beach visit for you. So how many no's do you experience before you hear a yes? And how do you stay in a positive mindset when you keep hearing all the no's?
Yeah. Years ago, with Husband in Tow, the name, if you're a native English speaker, the name, speaks for itself. It's been a little tricky kind of relaying the meaning behind the name of the blog, but for the first easily 2 or 3 years, I didn't do anything on the blog. It was Amber. It was Amber who was writing, photographing, doing social media, and pitching. And one day she just said, that's it. I've had it. I can't take people saying no anymore. And listen, I spent 13 years not being the best salesman of all time, and I've heard a lot of no's. And so it's sort of like water, I guess, on a duck. It just rolls off my back.
He likes to say that, but there are times that we've been in conversations with potential partners, and in the end, they've said no for a variety of reasons. And it doesn't roll off his back, always. Sometimes it's because we've been in talks with a tourism board for 6-8 months, going back and forth, and then at the end of the conversation, they say, oh, we've decided to no longer work with, bloggers during this budget. We're only working with traditional journalists. And, it's pretty fair for Eric to be frustrated that they've decided to change their mind. And, we wish that more tourism boards would be like Emilia-Romagna and Costa Brava and others that are willing to invest in new mediums and new ways of reaching a new audience. But sometimes that's not the case. And sometimes Eric stands up from his laptop and says a couple expletives, and we just move on to the next opportunity.
Yeah, no is a big motivator. And certainly it makes me refocus and sort of find an angle that perhaps they will say yes. And listen, there were a couple big names when I was selling advertising in the aviation industry that I never captured. They are my white whale. And there are a few tourism boards and travel brands that have repeatedly say no, that I check in with them and again, try to find a different approach to getting that yes. But it's not easy. If it was easy, everyone would be doing it.
Yeah, and I think on the other end, we often say no just as much as we say yes, because someone wants to have us pitch a product that we don't like or doesn't fit our audience, or it's a destination that we just don't feel right going to. I think the perfect example is actually Finland has been working with a lot of travel bloggers, mostly in the winter, to do winter activities in the Northern Lights. That is not our niche. I hate the cold. And we've told them we'd love to work with them on something maybe in the spring, summer, or fall, but the last thing you want is us, complaining about the cold. We're not, outdoor active people. It's just not the right fit. So those are the times that we say no, probably just as much, if not more, than we say yes to opportunities.
Yeah, that's an interesting example with Finland. I would think that the market on Northern Lights and the Scandinavian winter stories would be saturated. Let's think about what's new and different. What is there to do in Helsinki in July, right? That's a story.
Exactly. And, and that's a huge frustration of ours, I would say, with the overall tourism industry. It's just pounding away on sort of the same stories, the same destination, the same activities. As I think one of the reasons, you had asked earlier, why Girona? It's one of the reasons why we're here in Girona in the Costa Brava is because, and I'm going to go on the record and say this, I think they're the best tourism board in the world. They think outside the box. They don't want the same thing over and over again. The team that's there thinks left and right, not just straightforward, and they challenge us to come up with something new. You want to work with us? Come up with something interesting, something new, something fresh. And it really is just wonderful to have them right here in Girona. And I really wish that more tourism boards would take that same approach.
So what advice could you give to tourism boards around the world that you think could do things a little bit differently? What would you tell them?
I think there's a few things. Yeah, definitely think outside the box about how you can best work with bloggers and influencers and what I like to call content creators. Think about the unique kinds of content that person can create to help tell the story. I think right now, a lot of tourism boards and travel brands, hotel brands, everyone's focused on these, big Instagram influencers. And in our perspective, we just don't see the long-term ROI from inviting people who only have Instagram or whose primary focus is Instagram. You can't add links to posts. The life of an Instagram post is like 6 minutes or something like that, versus bringing someone in who can create SEO optimized blog posts, podcasts, ebooks. Like there's all sorts of ways that you can tell a story now and reach a different audience than you can not only from Instagram, but also reaching a different audience from Condé Nast Traveler. When was the last time you picked up a major magazine, a major travel magazine, and were surprised by what was on the cover? For me, it's always, they're writing about Paris again. How many times can you write about Paris on the cover of your magazine?
Tell the same story over and over, yeah.
Just tell the same story.
Here are 10 more things to know about Paris.
The undiscovered Paris. Paris down the dark alleys. And so just trying to find unique ways to really tell a story with an authentic voice that can reach a different audience.
Yeah, some of our friends are world-class photographers, world-class video producers. And so if you have somebody with this talent, use it have them create a photo book that you can put on your website. The sky's the limit. It is taking off the blinders and saying, okay, we always do X. Well, we're going to try Y this time. And really, as we keep saying, think outside the box.
Yeah, I think a lot of travel brands and tourism boards, they have budget to hire professional photographers or professional videographers. And we like to say, instead of spending that budget on a quote, traditional professional photographer, bring in an influencer that takes great photos. And that way you get to purchase the photos from them for your website and your social media, but then you also get their reach. You get the reach through their blog and their social channels. And I like to say it's sort of a twofer. You get that great content created, but then you also get the reach into their audience.
That's really good advice. I think one of the nice things about writing content online is the ability to put secondary and tertiary destinations forward. You're talking about yet another article about Paris, and I've noticed that as well. How many times can you talk about New York City, Paris, Hong Kong? These are great destinations, but once you've been 1, 2, or 3 times, you think about what else you want to see next. Well, if I'm in Hong Kong, I can actually take the ferry down and go to Macau for the day, right? Or I can go into mainland China. So getting out into the countryside and doing things a little bit differently. And this also helps the problem of overtourism. We talked about that in our online food travel summit last April. Danny Adler, who runs a tour operator in Barcelona, talked about the issue of overtourism in Barcelona. And he was saying that his solution is to get people into the lesser trafficked neighborhoods, maybe outside the city limits a little bit. So they're not always going to the big famous market or Las Ramblas. That it's not all about La Boqueria, Las Ramblas. There are other things that are also great to see and do in Barcelona. Get outside the center and diversify. And I think that this exact same thing, Girona is not Barcelona. It is off the beaten path. And I think these smaller destinations have a real opportunity to reach people because of things like SEO and great writing and great photography.
It's funny that you say that because, obviously Girona is a day trip from Barcelona. It's 38 minutes on the high-speed train. Not only just Girona, but the Costa Brava in general is all possible for an overnight trip or a day trip from Barcelona. It's a lot less crowded. It's more authentic. It's hard to find a bad meal here. We also just recently launched a website called Only in Costa Brava that focuses on Girona and Costa Brava travel. And just this morning, I was writing a blog post on how to get from Barcelona to Girona because that's our goal, is to try to get people to experience something that's a little different. Barcelona is a great city and it's an international city and it's where we go for dumplings and Thai food. But at the same time, I feel like Girona in this area is more authentic and more truly Catalan rather than being another big international city.
Yeah, and I think there's always this phenomena of younger people, especially, who have not yet been to Florence or Paris or London. I get that. They want to go, they want to see. Or you also hear about Chinese travelers, big groups of people who want to go and see these famous, iconic things like the Eiffel Tower. Okay, that's great. But once you do that, and how many times can you see the Eiffel Tower, right? You want to get out into the countryside, go down to Burgundy or Toulouse or somewhere else.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's a big problem for the tourism boards when they're thinking about the U.S. market, because obviously in the U.S. we get our 7 days off a year, 10 days off a year, and how are you going to spend those? You're going to spend them by going to London, to Paris, or Rome,
all in one trip,
or possibly all in one trip. Or okay, this year we're going to London. Next year we go to Paris. It's not. This year we go to Madrid. Next year we'll go to Sevilla. Next year we'll go to Valencia. It was interesting. We were just in the Gran Canaries, and we're actually on Gran Canaria. And the problem they're facing are trying to get people out of the resorts. Everyone, a lot of British, a lot of Irish tourists go straight down to the mega resorts on Lanzarote and Tenerife. And they just sit there and they don't go out and explore the local cuisine, the local wine, hiking. And I understand that. You get, some time off. You just want to go sit on a beach and not think about what you're doing on your holiday. Amber and I absolutely love to do that from time to time. But if you make repeated trips, and I speak about this because my cousins in Ireland do this all the time. They go to the same resorts year in and year out. Well, maybe you take a day trip outside and kind of see what the rest of the area looks like.
We did the same thing in Jamaica earlier this year. We worked with the tourism board there, and they're really focused on how to get people out of the all-inclusive resorts. And we visited banana and coffee plantations and went to traditional jerk chicken places. And we even explored some of the Jamaican fast food. We had no idea that there's these things called Jamaican meat pies. And we went to the two most popular places on the island. And it's sort of like a Boston Red Sox, New York Yankees rivalry between you either like one meat pie place or the other meat pie place. And so we actually wrote about that. And that's something that's really unique, that when you go to an all-inclusive resort in Jamaica, you don't generally have those opportunities unless you seek them out. And I think people are starting to get to the point where they do want those experiences. They want to eat particularly the local food.
You've identified something that is a serious concern in not just in the tourism industry, but in the food tourism industry as well. It's these all-inclusive resorts, and also cruise lines have this similar phenomenon where you get your bracelet that indicates you're staying at that resort. Have you seen the British comedy series Benidorm?
I've seen a few minutes of it when we were in Ireland last time. Yeah, it's sort of like the Jersey Shore, but in Spain. Yes.
Yeah, and the whole thing is these characters, it keeps repeating every year. The same characters keep going back to the same resort. I think I'm on season 4 now, and they just now started going out of the resort. They'll go into the city center and get a drink, and then hurry back to the resort because they didn't want to miss the free meal. And it's a thing. It happens. We're talking about Gran Canaria. I was there speaking at a conference a couple years ago, and they put us at one of these all-inclusive resorts. And I actually wanted to see about how I could get out of the resort to go have dinner one night. And I couldn't figure out where to go. There were no taxis in front of the hotel. Uber wasn't there. And I couldn't figure out how to, because it wasn't in the city center, right? So how do you get there? And it was not good. So I think that, I understand the benefit, but for food lovers, food travelers, we're probably not going to be staying at those all-inclusive resorts. We're explorers. We want to get out. And if we do find ourselves at an all-inclusive resort, then we're going to do everything we can to get out of there because we want to try the local. And it's also supporting the local economy when we do, because that money is spent locally and it's going to stay local rather than going back to a corporate headquarters somewhere.
Yeah, we totally agree. And I think the trip to Jamaica was a perfect example of that because we stayed at 2 different properties. We stayed when we were with the tourism board at a very typical all-inclusive, but we left every day to explore the island. And then the second part of our trip, we actually stayed at a luxury resort called Half Moon, which is beautiful. They have a travel company and a concierge that will help arrange people to go out and explore who want to explore. But they also have an amazing Jamaican chef who is really focused on making sure that even on the breakfast buffet, there are typical Jamaican dishes made authentically with authentic ingredients. They have Jamaican meat pies available for lunch every day. They're also taking local Jamaican recipes and elevating them in really unique ways. I call out them in particular because I think they're doing a great job of people want the luxury. They want to be by the pool. They want to be on the water, but they also want to eat well. And it helps that the GM there is also a foodie himself, but he and his chef are really focusing on making it as authentic as possible so that people do get to learn something and they're willing to chat with people about what an ingredient is or how a dish is made.
It sounds like they get it, and unfortunately that's not always the case in a lot of these resorts or hotels or cruise lines, that they're trying to deliver a predictable product like a 2-bedroom room or a cabin, interior, outside, whatever cabin. It's a predictable product, and they may not necessarily be focused on the food. And unfortunately, food and drink, they impact all 5 human senses, and they are the one thing that can really create an indelible mark on a traveler's mind.
Absolutely. We have dishes from time to time and we just get flashbacks to, oh gosh, when we were in Thailand or Vietnam. Or one of the pleasures of living in a foodie country is that you can have conversations with people about food. It just encapsulates everything that we as humans, we have here with our eyes, our nose, our mouths. I do want to just go back and add one little comment about the general manager from Half Moon. I think it should be a prerequisite that if you run a hotel, you should be a foodie.
I think so too. In talking about just traveling for food in general, we've had great experiences doing all sorts of things, but it's very rare that when we sit back and look back on our last 6 years in particular of travel, that we think about a beautiful cathedral that we've seen or an art museum that we visited. And there are people who that's their main interest and that's why they travel, and those opportunities are there. Instead, when we're reminiscing about some of our best experiences, it's always like a particular winemaker we've met or a particular lunch at an agriturismo in the countryside in Emilia-Romagna, or always someone that we've met, and often food that we've eaten or wine that we've drank, or those are the memories that stay with us longer. And they're also some of the things that we try to replicate at home, which, we try to make. We've been experimenting with jerk seasoning that we brought back from Jamaica and learning how to cook some of it at home. So it is something that I think stays with you in a different way than visiting a cathedral or a museum does.
Yeah, it's the storytelling. When you meet those people, when you meet the Nana who has to explain to you in very broken English or through your tour guide in better English, the history of the recipe, how it was in her family, how she made it, how she hopes you enjoy it. That is the kind of thing you remember forever, but you're not going to necessarily remember the hotel room where you're staying.
I will always remember the nanas that taught us in one pasta making class in Emilia-Romagna, because they don't speak English. They're volunteers. Their goal is to protect the traditional recipes and help spread the word about the traditional recipes. And I will always remember the one nana who kept, almost like a nun in Catholic school, kept hitting Eric on the wrist or on the finger saying, "No, Eric, no, no."
My tortellini making skills are an embarrassment to Italians everywhere. I can make tagliatelle, but not tortellini, and my knuckles felt the wrath of the nonna.
I tried to make tortellini. That didn't go so well. Also in Italy.
And I have smallishly girly hands. I just can't do it.
Well, we'll put a steak on the grill for you. How's that? Big old man steak.
There we go. There we go. I can make the sauce. I just can't make the... Yeah.
Now let's talk about Eric and Amber as the people now. We talked about your business and what you do and some of the business revelations you've had. Let's talk about Eric and Amber as the people. What kind of legacy do you hope to leave behind?
Well,
it's a profound question.
It is a profound question. Obviously, I'd love to educate people more on destinations and what to eat and where to eat. And I hope that what we're able to do on the blog, on our Only in Costa Brava website, will help people enjoy a destination more. And I know that's been the case. We've gotten feedback from readers, some Amazon reviews even, and some direct messages that people have enjoyed a destination more because they've read what we've done. And I think that's obviously the primary goal and most important. But I think personally, we just weren't happy in our prior lives, or weren't even as happily married in our private lives as we are now, despite the fact that we now spend 24/7 together. We are happier as individuals, happier as a couple, I think happier people. And I think when you do something that you enjoy, I think it makes you a better person. And I think in general, we need happier, better people in the world to make everyone around them happy and better people. And I think before I was negative and cranky and tired all the time. Now I'm happier, only tired a little less.
Yeah, and I think for me, in 2009, we quit our jobs for the first time and traveled. We ended up staying on the road for almost 14 months. And came back to life in the U.S. and we went back into our careers. And in the 2 years that we were in the States, I personally was very judgmental of people. And I really, at the time, felt everyone should quit their job. Everyone should travel. Everyone should realize that their career isn't everything. And unfortunately, we lost some friends because of that. And I think my new perspective, and perhaps to answer your question, to echo Amber, not everyone can go out and travel. Not everyone can quit their jobs and do what we've done. Find something that makes you happy. If you, and I'm stealing Amber's words from years ago, if you think that going and teaching English to somebody is going to make you happy, go do it. If buying a bigger boat makes you happy, that's not necessarily for me, but great. If you're happier, then that's great. But I do think that taking the time to look outside your 9 to 5, Monday through Friday, is important. And yeah, Amber and I weren't very happy as a couple when we were in our careers. I'm more than willing to share that. And now we are. we're just happier because we've found that thing that makes us get up every morning, despite the fact that we don't get paid every day, but we're happier doing this than we were in our corporate lives.
Yeah, and I do think, Eric and I have talked about this a lot. I do think at one point we were focused on this. Everyone should travel more, and everyone should, obviously I can't tell everyone to quit their job and become travel bloggers because it's already difficult enough. I realize, as Eric said, that's not the possibility for every single person. I just wish that every person, particularly in the States where people tend to live to work and not work to live, I just wish that every American would just sit and think about what makes them happy and just try to spend a few minutes more each day doing that thing, whether that's spending more time with family and friends, whether that's running or biking or reading or something that's not tied to your job. Many Americans have a lot of privileges that people in the rest of the world don't have. And I think sometimes people take that for granted. And I think that people just need to take a moment and just think about what could make their life more enjoyable and then do it.
Great advice. So what frustrates you most in business or life?
Oh, algorithms and algorithms. I mean, I have to say it from... I do wish sometimes that to be successful as a blogger, as an influencer, I could just write whatever I want and make money from it. And unfortunately, that's not the world that we live in, and constantly battling with Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and Google on a daily basis. I wish I could do less of that and spend more time writing about the food and the wine that I would prefer to do. Every day I wake up with some new notification from Google, and I spend an hour trying to figure out what's wrong and how to fix it.
I think for me, an unwillingness to try things. I was a very picky eater growing up. I owe my mother a lifetime of apologies for all of that. And I think just moving outside of food for a second, just an unwillingness to try something new. You may not like it. That's okay. At least you tried, as we like to say, maybe try something twice. But yeah, an unwillingness to try something new or be exposed to something new. That frustrates me.
I think right now our lives are always about doing something new, whether it is trying a new dish or going to a new destination, or the fact that Eric's a Twitteraholic and I'm learning to take photos and video. And these are all things that 6 years ago we had no idea how to do. I had no idea how to start a website. I didn't even know what SEO was, or food tourism, or culinary travel. Those were all words that I didn't even know existed 6 years ago. It seems like every day we are learning something new and trying something different and looking at the world in a different way.
Is there a book that you are reading right now that's something you maybe read before you go to bed at night?
I actually just started reading Real Food, Fake Food, which I'm only about 2 chapters in, and I think it kind of ties into a lot of what we talked about today, but really talks about quality food and how to know that what you're eating is what it's meant to be. The first chapter is on Parmesan Reggiano and Prosciutto di Parma, so it's what we've been talking about. But I think it really, especially in the US, but even places like London and other big cities, people aren't always eating what they think they're eating. And that's been sort of enlightening to read, but that's what I'm currently reading.
Well, Eric and Amber, this has been really interesting, getting into your minds and learning a little bit more about how you operate and the lessons you've learned in both business and life. Is there anything that you'd like to leave with our listeners before we close up for today?
I just think, feel free to follow us on With Husband in Tow and Only in Costa Brava. We're sort of all over, the internet. But I think it's one of Eric's key bits of advice that he likes to give people is when you're traveling to a new destination and you're looking for some place to eat, always go 1 or 2 blocks off whatever the main square or main tourist destination is. I think you're more likely when you're walking down an alley to find some really authentic, unique food rather than sort of focusing on what happens to be in a lot of places, the tourist traps in the middle of the square.
Yeah, that's thanks for stealing my suggestion. My other suggestion would be go to the bellhops and the valets for your culinary information. I do like a good concierge, but one of the single greatest food tips we ever received was from a bellman at, can't remember the hotel, but it was in Kuala Lumpur. we were asking, where do you go to eat? And he just sort of pointed down the road and he said, over there, go to that padang. And oh my goodness, it was a meal for a lifetime. We actually, every time we're back in Kuala Lumpur, we go to the same restaurant. Absolutely wonderful. So ask your bellhops, ask your valets for your food tips.
You've really uncovered something quite important, is this word of mouth in marketing both destinations and the different food and beverage tourism experiences that people can have. Word of mouth is so absolutely critical. And you can, if you're writing a blog or a website or you're a tourism office publishing a website, you can only talk about so many things. And especially if you are a destination marketing organization, many times you might have members, or you might have to talk about chain businesses that are part of your tourism office. You really don't want to, but you have to. And sometimes chains are okay too, but let's save the chain dining for the airports on the way home. Really, it's talking to the local people, like you said, the bellhops, your Uber driver, your food tour guide, people who you might be staying with, or your Airbnb host. Those are the people you want to talk to get the tips of where they eat, where the best places are, and you'll end up with a vastly different and hopefully wonderful picture of that destination by the time you leave and return home.
And that's what a travel blog is. A travel blog is just an online form of word of mouth recommendations. The best travel blogs out there are the ones that they've eaten at the restaurants, they've eaten that particular dish, and they've gotten the recommendations and done all the research so that you don't have to.
Well, thank you, Eric and Amber. I look forward to seeing you in Spain soon.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Eric, for letting us share our passion for food and travel.
And everyone's welcome in Girona.
That's all for this episode of Eat Well, Travel Better, the business of food travel, produced by the World Food Travel Association. Join us next time where we learn from some of the world's most successful people in the food and beverage tourism industry. We'll meet these leaders and examine their secrets of success. We reveal the obstacles and challenges they have faced, along with their solutions and triumphs, and give you ideas and inspirations for many of the same business issues that you may be facing as well. Thank you for joining us today, and until next time, eat well and travel better.